Now for Quick Take by the Numbers, where we give you the numbers that tell the story. This afternoon's number, $438 million. So when Amazon went public, all the way back in 1997, the company ended its first day of trading with a market value of $438 million. The IPO in May of 1997 raised $54 million for what was then an online bookstore. And on the first day of trading, the stock rose 30% above its opening price. That's according to a CNET article from that day. So fast forward to today. Amazon is the largest online retailer in the world. It has a market value of $1.7 trillion. And it not only sells just about everything under the sun, but also provides the cloud computing infrastructure for many of the apps and services that you and I use each and every day. And the stock, well, since that IPO, it's increased about 224,000%, or on average, just about 40% each year, according to Bloomberg calculations. When Jeff Bezos announced in an email to his employees his intention to step down as CEO, he wrote, quote, "I've never had more energy, and this isn't about retiring." He promised he intends to stay active in the company when Andy Jassy takes over, but what exactly will the move do to the company, and what does it mean for Jeff Bezos? Brad Stone joins me now. He's an editor for Bloomberg Technology, a writer for Bloomberg Businessweek, and also the author of The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon. Brad, thanks so much for being here. I want to go back to yesterday, 4 o'clock Eastern time, when the news crossed the wire that Jeff Bezos was moving aside. Were you surprised?
Well, luckily, nobody was here in my house at the time, because if they were, they would have heard an expletive. So, that's an admission that I was surprised. And the expletive was because, Jim, as I told you, I have a sequel to The Everything Store coming out in May, and the news meant that I would have to revise the epilogue. But that said, it did make a certain amount of sense. I mean, one thing that I kind of learned as I reported the book is that Bezos has been very closely involved with the new things at Amazon, the inventions. So that's Alexa, and which is now about to respond because I mentioned its name here in the room, the Ghost Store, the cashierless technology, the healthcare initiatives, Project Kuiper, the satellite internet access system that they're trying to launch. But the bigger services, the older services, the retail, and then AWS, Andy Jassy runs, he's allowed his deputies to kind of take over and run those pretty autonomously with some guidance from him. And in some ways, this is a formalizing of that status quo. Jeff becomes executive chairman. He's going to continue to work on the new things. He's going to continue to weigh in on what they call the one-way doors, which are the irreversible decisions. But, it's also a big moment for Andy Jassy to step up.
Brad, I want to talk about the legacy that Jeff Bezos will leave behind in terms of the management and the way that his DNA from a management perspective. Because as you outlined in The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos does have a unique way of doing things. What are some examples of his management style, and how have they really been made a part of Amazon's DNA?
Right, and let's acknowledge that it's a little bit of a controversial legacy, right? Some of these management practices are, embraced by other companies, and then, people, economists in particular, activists, kind of worry about them and their impact on business and on American or really global workers. Well, first of all, let's start with some of the kind of Bezos platitudes, which are, which make a lot of sense. Long-term thinking, don't be, overly accommodating of Wall Street's short-term impulses, a customer obsession. They've got these 14 leadership principles that are kind of religious dogma inside the company. And Bezos also has brought, and will continue to bring, this kind of sense that Amazon needs to keep reinventing itself, that there are no annuities in retail, and that if they don't keep inventing new things and kind of changing the relationship with customers, then a competitor is going to come out of nowhere. And that's why this company looks so different every couple of years. And yesterday in the earnings report, we just saw that, it's got this AWS business on a $50 billion run rate. It's 15 years old. It's extraordinary. And things like voice computing and cashierless retail and the healthcare stuff they're trying, it all comes from Bezos and its sort of constant inventiveness. The other side is the relationship with workers, what some economists call the fissured workplace, which is kind of outsourcing the less glamorous tasks to contractors. They've got this big transportation division, Amazon's delivering its own packages, but those aren't employees. Those are contractors without health care or any employment security. And that's part of Bezos's legacy as well. And, we have a union vote in Alabama where workers are deciding whether to unionize. And that probably presents a big threat to Amazon because, they have prioritized a direct relationship with their workers and probably not wanting those workers to really stick around after a couple of years. They view it
Right.
as a launching point for people, but they don't want a long-term disgruntled workforce.
Brad, I want to talk about Andy Jassy a little bit, the leader who will take over as CEO in the third quarter of 2021. Who is he, and how is he different or similar to Bezos? I mean, the two have worked together for decades.
Well, Jim, if you remember when my first book came out, I got a bad review from Mackenzie Bezos, Jeff's wife at the time. And one of the things that she kind of didn't like these lieutenants that had completely internalized Bezos's vocabulary, his way of talking, his discipline and not saying much. And his reiteration of like these constant principles like long-term thinking. And that is Andy Jassy. I mean, I don't use the term anymore because he is a remarkable executive in his own right. But Jassy's like Bezos. He's cleaved from Jeff's rib. Mm-hmm. He's brought the same operating philosophy, been enormously successful. He was Jeff's first shadow or TA. So he spent 2 years following him around. He came from the retail business. He sits on the leadership team, the S team. So he's been a part of every major decision over the last 20 years, from HQ2 to decisions on what countries to enter. And yet he's also marshaled this extraordinary business that has fundamentally changed the way companies, governments, universities provision their technology resources. That's now in the cloud, and Amazon is facing the Microsofts and the Googles and IBMs of the world, and it's kind of remade an industry.
Brad, you have another book coming out, an update to the Everything Store that's coming out in a few months. How does this change the Amazon story?
Well, going back to the expletive yesterday, it's certainly the end of an era. And Amazon Unbound is a sequel to the Everything Store. It's kind of the last 10 years, from everything they've created, all the challenges, Bezos's rise to kind of fame and tabloid interest, becoming the richest man in the world, Amazon becoming so controversial. This is a capstone. Again, it's a formalizing of a kind of status quo that was true inside Amazon for a long time. But, you have to now, it's a good time to take a step back and reflect on what's been a remarkable story over 25 years. The guy created a company that's worth $1.7 trillion and probably has done more to change our economic reality today than any company or any entrepreneur than we could think of. So it's an extraordinary accomplishment, and it'll be interesting to see if he can really let go and let Jassy pilot the plane, or if he's going to stay, micromanaging things in the way that he's sort of known for.
Look, February 2nd, 2021 is certainly a day that people who follow Amazon will remember. Brad Stone, we're grateful you are here. And look, anyone who wants to hear more of this conversation, Brad Stone will be joining Carol Massar and me on the radio today at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So be sure to tune in for that. That's Bloomberg Technology and Bloomberg Business Week's Brad Stone. Brad, thank you so much for your time.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quicktake now for insight in an instant.